welcome everyone to today's AMA with Buddy Sola from Akupara Games. Thank you for being here, Buddy. If you would like to introduce yourself, a little bit about you, about the company.
Yep, sure. So yeah, my name is Buddy Sola. I have been working in games for the last 10 years. I got my start in AAA. I worked at Square Enix for about 7 years, 6 or 7 years depending on where you round it. But I had always been connected to the indie scene, and when Akupara was looking for a community manager, they reached out. I was part of that whole hiring process, and I ended up being like the fourth person, right? The company was incredibly small when I first joined it. But in the past couple of years, we've grown a lot and gotten much bigger and better. And now we're looking to expand, or I guess not expand. Our previous marketing guy, who's a really awesome guy named Richard, he got a different job, and so we need to fill that hole in our marketing team. At the same time, we're also looking to expand sort of the producer team, just because one of the interesting challenges to being an indie game publisher is having to deal with multiple different projects from multiple different developers, right? Because at any individual time, we're balancing 6, 7, 8 projects that are all in some form of, oh, we're announcing this, we're doing DLC, we're revealing this to everybody. And so just having someone else who can manage the task list and understand is what I would say the rigorous details of launching a bunch of content for a bunch of different indie games. That just requires another producer to help out.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign when teams have producers, when indie developers have producers. And a lot of developers forego them because they can get along without them. It's one of those nice to have expenses. It's viewed as a nice to have expense. I feel like it's a must have, and it pays for itself in the expediency, right? The efficiency that a really good producer is going to help provide. It's great that you as a publisher, right? One, you have a producer that can help manage your internal projects, but as a publisher that you could offer some external producer type of support to your developers.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're always like looking for and looking to do, right? Because what David pitched. So David is our CEO. I'm probably gonna refer to him a bunch. When David pitched me on Akupara, his thing was like, listen, we don't want to be a publisher for people who just need whatever $500,000. If you're making an indie game and all you need is money, but you want to just hoof it with everything else, probably another publisher is better for you. Probably it makes more sense to go to whoever else in the space. If you are a team that wants to work with Akupara, if you're a development team that wants to work with Akupara, what you're looking for is the effort and the man hours and putting in the time. And so that's always something that we're thinking about. That's always something that we're trying to offer and provide for all of the teams that we're working with, because like it's not super fun being part of a team that doesn't care about the projects that we're working on, or doesn't care about the partners that we're working with. We want to go the extra mile for the clients, for the partner, to make sure that we are helping them realize the game to the maximum level of satisfaction that we can.
Super important when you're looking for, if you're a developer, you're looking for a publisher, or you're a publisher and you're looking for a platform partner. My friend Nick Sutner coined this phrase, is finding the champion. You always have to find at least one champion within these larger organizations that's really going to be an advocate and an evangelist for you and your product, your team, your vision, because a lot of these big companies, they have competing priorities, right? So always finding somebody that's going to be really enthusiastic, that's going to then go and fight for your product, your game, your team. And you're talking about that being reciprocated both ways, right? You're going to also want to work with a developer that really wants to work with you, that's not there just for a check, that really is interested in working with you and the team and making this a true collaboration. So that makes a lot of business sense. And again, we're all working here, right? We're making games. We're then putting those games that are out into the world, and then we're hopefully making money and being able to pay our bills as a result. But we're also working with people, and that's actually the most important part. And those interactions that you want to have, like you want to cultivate a really strong, healthy, good, awesome, fun relationships. So picking the right partners is it's a significant part of that. Obviously, you want a partner that actually wants a partner.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it's the quiet origin story to the company. Akupara was initially like we were a game developer, but just after having an experience with an indie game publisher who didn't do that, who didn't put the work in,
Hmm.
it became this thing of why don't we do that? Like why don't we be the publisher that we were hoping to sign with in a way rather than it's like a be the change you want to see in the world
Absolutely.
philosophy.
Yeah.
Um
I think
which
for a lot of us, especially in indie games, but a lot of us in the world, we're all just figuring things out as we go along. And one of the really great models to do so, to do things differently, is really treat others the way that you want to be treated. So thinking about us as employees, be the manager that you wanted. And I think I think I'm a really good people manager. I'm one of the actual good ones, and that's all I've done. That's all. This is my whole model is just what did I want? What did I wish my managers provided me when I was an employee? And then that's what I give my employees. For example, just like radical transparency. Can you please just tell me what's going on all the time? No secrets, right? That's something that I valued as an employee, and that's something that I give my employees now as a manager. Yeah, so that's perfect. Trying to find you were looking for the publisher, and that publisher didn't exist. The publisher that you wanted that was going to provide you everything that you needed didn't really exist, so you then went and created it. You have the Indie Houses Collective, which is we're not necessarily big enough alone, right, to be able to meet these standards, so let's go and create that some way, shape, or form. We love that ethos that we see now popping up multiple times already in this very short conversation at Akupara. So let's jump back into circle back to your kind of origin story. I'd love to hear more about how you got started, what your role was at Square Enix, what the transition has then been like going from Square
Sure.
Enix to Akupara, and then maybe some of the key differences that you've seen from AAA and indie.
I feel particularly lucky because, or maybe I'm just like particularly optimistic. Like, I've never had a bad job, right? I look back on all of my old jobs pretty fondly. When I started at Square Enix, I was a game master for Final Fantasy XIV, which we all now think of as a big MMO, but at the time it was a real question because Final Fantasy XIV launched in 2011. This is before I was at the company. Launched in 2011, was a huge flop, right? The 1.0 version, it was so bad that they took down the servers and were like, listen, we're gonna remake this thing from the ground up. Relaunches in 2013 with the first expansion, A Realm Reborn. This is when I was hired into the company, and I was hired under this like really doomer one at Square Enix thought that we were just gonna have a repeat. Like no one had like confidence that, or it was less about confidence, it was more about like risk, right? Like nobody wanted to predict that A Realm Reborn was going to do amazingly well. So it was undershot, right? Just to be expectations on the project. And it ended up being just huge. It like this gigantic release, immediately flooded with a million different people, a million different players. But anyway, so I started in the GM team and I guess I can't talk too specifically about this, but like I had a very specific job in the GM team. I was like the guy who focused on this one really like particular detail of that project. If I was in a world without an NDA, I could tell stories that like there were situations where I was the only person in the entire company who could do this thing, right? For the game. And that is a kind of a neat feeling. Eventually I got promoted to a supervisor position, so I was running a whole team. I was running the graveyard shift. All of the GMs who were on the graveyard shift, it was my job to watch over and direct their minute to minute activities, that kind of a thing. And in that process, I got really good at what were called supervisor escalations, which is to say that let's say you're having a chat with a GM and you're not having a good time and you go, I want to talk to your supervisor. The typical, I need to talk to your manager type behavior. I just became the guy who took all of those. So to the point where I was dealing with like 60 to 80% of all supervisor escalations that were coming through the GM team. And I just got very good at talking with players in a really direct way about the game and about its design because you know people there's a lot of frustration built into games because that's what makes the challenge fun, that's what makes games interesting. And so being able to talk with people about the game design behind some of this stuff, like, oh yeah, loot is random because it's like a Christmas gift. It is more fun to open a gift when you don't know what it is rather than like opening the thing that you knew 2 weeks ago your mom was going to get for you, if that makes sense. And just being able to talk to players on that sort of level created this, I don't know, I had this real desire to become the voice for the company, because players will sometimes have weird conceptions about what it looks like to work in games development, and I want to pull back that veil. I want to help them understand what like the realities of game development and game design are. And one of the things that became a little bit frustrating in that process was all of the red tape that comes with working at a AAA studio. Red tape is a bad way to phrase it. It is more about focus, right? At Akupara, the marketing team is 3 people with 2 producers, which maybe makes it 5 people, whether or not you count the producers. When I was working at Square Enix, the GM, I was a part of one GM team, which was part of the overall GM department, which was half of the overall community team. And that team was 100 people before the entire marketing department that included everybody else, which is probably pushing upwards of 200, 250 people. And at that point, like, your focus is so narrow. You are such a cog in the machine, because the machine is 250 people or whatever else, that it can sometimes sort of be a little bit constricting, right? In comparison, I am the entire community department. There is nobody except for me at Akupara. And that's a really freeing feeling, because I can do whatever I want. I am going to have to stretch my wings and fly, because there is so much stuff that needs to get done. And part of what that means is I'm going to have to learn a ton of new skills in order to get there. So that's my like origin story when it comes to getting into the games industry, and what it was like working at a big AAA studio and kind of transitioning out.
Awesome. I love that perspective, and really paints, I think accurately paints the picture between some of the key differences between these very large companies and our smaller indie teams. And we have a lot of people that will come into the server and they will ask for recommendations. I'm starting out my career. What should I do? Should I specialize, right, on a very specific thing, or should I go more general and try to be the jack of all trades? And we see here there's needs for, and it really depends upon where you want to go. It also could then depend upon who you are and what's really going to fit for you as an individual. So for me, the jack of all trades, wearing multiple hats, even doing something like I worked at a platform or working at a publisher where we get to work on a lot of games, that fits my needs. I'm not somebody that could work on a single game for 2 to 3 years. That's just not who I am. But obviously, that works for a lot of people. So,
Yeah, there are definitely days where I wake up and I really miss the singular focus of what my old job was, compared to a world where you're being pulled in a million different directions, because there's all these different projects that all have their own unique needs, and there are only so many hours in the day.
absolutely. Buddy, I remember. So I started my career in customer service, and I think fondly of the days that I used to be able to clock in at 7 o'clock in the morning, answer phones until 3:30, and then leave my job and not think about it until I get back the next day. It was a pretty great it was a pretty great job. But yeah, this specialization versus the broad general appeal. There's space for both of it, and find out who you are and what you want to be, and then you can find opportunities for both. So it's really cool. All right, sorry. I was going to go down a tangent like I do, but we're already 20 minutes in. So I've got a couple other questions that I did want to get to before we then started turning over to the community. So I want
Sure.
to cut myself off and create some time. Let's talk a little bit more about these current roles. Can you tell us what you're looking for in both the marketing and the production roles? Just
Yep,
give us a
sure.
general review.
So to start with the marketing strategist, which is a weird sort of term, also marketing like relations is how we're thinking about it. One of the ways that we think about the marketing team is who are you talking to, right? Who are you appealing to? The marketing team right now is 3 people. It is this relations role, and then it is myself and the other guy in the team who is our social media manager, Miguel. And so the idea is that the 3 of us break down that question that question in different ways. So, for instance, as the community manager, my job is to appeal to the already captured audience of Akupara. If you have played a different Akupara game, if you have played Mutazione or The Dark Side Detective or Grime or whatever, how can I connect you to some of the new games that we're publishing, that we're putting out, that you might enjoy, right? That you might want to have a good time with. That's my prerogative. Miguel is our social media manager, and his prerogative is, okay, how can I connect fans to in an outreach sense? If you've never heard about Akupara, what can I do to get your eyes on us and take a look at some of our projects, take a look at some of our games that might connect with you? And so he's obviously focused on TikTok, he's focused on Twitter, right? Like that kind of stuff. The marketing relations person on the team is really about connecting to, if Miguel and I are both B2C, right, business to customer, the marketing relations person is more B2B, essentially, right? This person is doing outreach to press, this person is doing outreach to influencers, this person is doing outreach to events and getting our games submitted to big events like the Mix or Guerrilla Collective or whatever else. And so that's the way that, the way that we think about it, the way that we target our titles, and the way that we divvy up responsibilities for like that marketing strategist position. Really, the thing that we're looking for on a PR, like a public relations level, is someone that has experience with stuff like press release, that has contacts in the game's press, that they could go, hey, listen, I want to show you this cool thing that I've been working on, or here's a review key. I think that you'd really connect with this game for whatever reason that would be. When it comes to the producer role, is more about managing the overall structure of the project and keeping everybody on task, if that makes sense. So the producer splits responsibilities. The two producers each have half of our project. So one of our producers will have a project A, B, C, D, E, and then the other one will have F, G, H, I, L, M, N, O, P kind of thing, right? Like they are splitting the projects 1-to-1 just to everything correctly managed. And a lot of the minor back end stuff falls to the producers, right? Store page management in terms of just what is being uploaded, what is being changed, keeping track of like builds, that kind of just administrative stuff comes down to the producers, right? If we're going to be publishing a new patch, I'm going to be writing the patch notes, because a patch is appealing to players who are already invested in our game, and I am going to be coordinating with the producer on that project about when the build gets set live, and we can tell players that, okay, here you can play the new update, sort of thing.
Awesome. That's a really helpful context. Tell us more about the company. How would you describe the company culture in your own words?
The thing I would use to describe Akupara is like ambition, which maybe has a weird connotation, but like striving, like drive, right? This sort of falls into the same place of being in an indie studio is really different than being in one of these AAA studios, because you have a lot of room to do stuff. There's none of this red tape, there's none of these restraints. Part of that is we're trying to find people who want to stretch their wings and fly, right? Who want to pick up new skills and learn new things, because the job would be better if like we had that kind of thing. One of the things that I honestly struggled with this when I first joined Akupara was I felt like I kept wanting to send things to some other person, because I was used to that. Like I wanted to say, okay, I send this to our video editor. Okay, I'm going to send this to whatever, but there is nobody to do that. If you want to take good screenshots, you got to learn to take good screenshots. And that's true for the whole company. Everybody in the company is always just having to pick up these new different skills, whether that's our developers who are learning new engines, right? Or learning a code base from a developer, whether that's people like me in the marketing team. I am now, like, most of my job at this point actually is a lot of video editing, or I'm writing blogs, or I'm managing like the email list. And all of those are skills that I had to pick up over the course of working at Akupara. So I think the thing that unites everybody that is working at the company is that drive to learn more, to push it the extra 110%, to find the cool new thing that we can do for any one of our projects.
How did you manage that transition? So again, going from Square Enix, where you do have SOPs, standard operating procedures, you have processes that you are supposed to follow. You have to respect this chain of command. There's all this approval process, which can do a lot of like harm in conditioning us to those practices. Like we can learn that's what it means to be an employee. To then, you talked about feeling the need to seek approval or to go for somebody to then execute this other part of the thing but there is nobody. How did you transition? What did that look like? What were some surprises or some tricks that you picked up that helped you make that transition and be able to succeed in both environments? Because
Yeah,
they are
the
different.
interesting thing is when I first started Akupara, so like I said, I was the fourth person hired as a full-time employee. There were a bunch of people working, but everybody was these contractors essentially, where we didn't have the work necessary to guarantee somebody full-time. But I was picked up and I was working full-time for the company and I was doing essentially everything. So at that point there was no split in the marketing team. And so I was running all of the socials, I was running the Discord, I was writing the patch notes. I was doing like all of this extra stuff. And the big thing that I did have to learn was really not, this sort of comes off in a flippant way, but it's like not asking for permission or approvals. I kept forwarding stuff essentially to David where I was like, hey, can you sign off on this? Hey, can you take a look at this or whatever? And he was like, you don't have to do this. Like, I trust you. Set it live, right? Like that kind of a thing. And now I'm at this point where I just want to handle as much of it on my own shoulders as I can, because something that I'm trying to avoid, I guess I would say, is getting bogged down in this approvals space. So our sort of at Akupara, the way that we want to think about this stuff is that a certain person owns the vision of a project as it is reaching fruition, and there are key moments along the path where we look for feedback and permission, but otherwise you just go forward. So if I'm going to write a video, for instance, like I'm going to do a video where I'm narrating over some gameplay to try and introduce the game to people or something like that, there's a feedback pass on the script phase. So I write the whole script, I record a test read of me doing the VO, I send that to someone, there's feedback there, and then I do the whole video end to end, and then there's feedback there. Because otherwise what happens is you get to, okay, oh, here's the script for feedback, okay, here's the VO for feedback, all right, here's a shot list for feedback, okay, here's all the footage we captured for feedback. All of those things add a ton of time to the process, and that's to the detriment of efficiency of just getting things done. And so that's something that I'm always thinking about, right? Like, what is the way that we can be the most efficient folks that we can working on any of our individual projects, and really making sure that we are getting things out the door without getting bogged down by bouncing things back and forth internally all the time.
Right. There's so much good stuff here. So I'm going to touch on a few of them. One is some of the themes that I'm hearing is one, you're looking for people that are problem solvers. Right.
Yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah, that's a big one, right?
all of us, anytime we hire, right, when we're hiring somebody, we've got an open rec. Every job description that you see on Work with Indies, that is a person-sized problem that a company is looking to fill. Good thing for us, we're all people-sized, right? So we can fill some of those positions and solve those problems for them. But really looking for somebody that can come in and do the critical thinking to think through whatever task or project that we have through the end and solve those problems, hopefully on their own. Obviously, there's asking questions, leaning on some people from time to time, but really looking for people to be able to take a task and see it through to completion. And that, again, in larger organizations, you could be trained against that, where you're constantly needing to seek approval. So that's something, like you said, you're sending everything to David and you're looking for feedback. And that is a thing that needs to be unlearned in the organizations that really support that. So being the problem solver, you talked about doing like the cool new thing, finding the cool new way that we could then experiment to really highlight and showcase our game developers games in a new unique way that's going to get them the attention that they deserve. So really just experimenting, taking some risks, and doing a lot of, I always love firsts. It's one of the big milestones that I look for myself and now from my team is let's do something for the first time as a company, as a team, or maybe for the first time ever. And that's when you're looking for first, that forces kind of innovation. And then the third thing that I just heard there was, again, it's actually one of my favorite phrases in kind of business and in management is asking forgiveness, not permission. Right? Again, this thing that really needs to be learned. But that coincides with the two above, being a problem solver, seeing a thing from start to finish, and then being experimental, taking risks, trying things for the first time. So asking for forgiveness, not permission, going and doing the thing. There's one, so you go through a process of this unlearning, which is you ask, what should I do? Then it's, you ask, can I do this? Then it transitions to, I did this and these are the results. And that's what I am looking for often when I'm hiring. And I think that's a lot what our smaller indie teams are looking for when we're looking at for that type of independence.
Yeah, in a lot of way, that's what I mean when I say like ambition. Like one of the things that happened a lot when I was first at the company was things just ended up on my plate, and it was like, what the I don't know how to do this. It's, hey, we need you to recut this trailer for a million different partners, which is a weird thing that no one ever expects. Like, that's not in the job description, but it is something that needs to get done because we need to put a launch trailer up on the YouTube for Nintendo, Sony,
Yep.
Xbox, and whatever, and they
Yeah.
all have different specifications for what that trailer should look like, and someone has to be the person to go in and edit like the fine details of that trailer to make sure, right, that it is working out essentially. And that happened to be me. That just happened to be like, hey, listen, I eventually got really good at it, and now it is now it's like second nature. It's, oh yeah, can you make the Nintendo variations, because there are multiple, right? There are different specifications for not just Nintendo, but Nintendo America, Nintendo Europe, Nintendo Japan, putting it on their YouTube versus putting it on their storefront. But like, those skills are the kinds of skills that you really gotta pick up quick.
Right. Cool. So we also talked about, we've already touched on your time with the company. When it started, it was just you're the fourth person. You're wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of things. Akupara is different now, grown up a little bit bigger, obviously more partners, more games. Can you tell us a little bit about how the company has changed since you joined?
Sure. So I think I would say that the biggest thing that has changed about the company is the focus, right? One of those things about like me being brought on so early is that, and we started as this developer, was that like the publishing side of things was never supposed to be a big deal. Like, it was always supposed to be its own little corner of the company. Our main focus was doing stuff like porting, was doing development, work for hire projects, etc. But the publishing side has taken over to become the main, like the engine of the company. In 2019, if we were to have this conversation, I would have said, oh, like, the engine of the company is the development, is like the development work. Now the engine of the company is really the main thrust of publishing that we do. These are the projects that we are working on, whether they are signed or whether they are projects that have a long tail. So obviously, for instance, the Dark Side Detective is a game that we published last year, came out about a year ago in April of 2021, but there are bonus cases that are coming out, essentially these content updates, and we need to treat each of those releases like its own kind of miniature like game release. And that's the kind of thing that is really dominating the company now, versus the sort of like, we are working on this aspect of this project. There is still some of that work for hire stuff, but it's not something that we touch on the marketing team. On the marketing team, we are solely focused on the publishing angle of Akupara, and maybe the most that we'll ever do is on Twitter, we'll talk about, hey, this is a cool project that we worked on. For instance, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what is like a cool work for hire thing that we worked on, but I'm drawing a kind of blank.
What would you say? So team size, right? So 4 people, how big is the team?
Yeah, so the marketing team, in terms of its core, is 3 people, right? The publishing team is bigger than that, because the publishing team encapsulates sort of everyone. That's like a dozen people, including a bunch of like developers who are working on like ports or you're just assisting on like the project for the game. And the overall size of the company in its like sum total is about 30 people, which is more or less the size that we wanted at. One of the big things that we're talking about internally, or that was a big thing around the turn of the big all hands meeting at the end of 2021, hey, this is our 2021, is that we are out of a growth focus and into a like sort of streamline focus. 30 people is about the size that we want the company to be at. Yeah, and we want to really specialize and hone that group of people to expand. Okay, so something that we're thinking about all the time is as we do things, we naturally get more efficient at doing those things. We're getting into this groove, and now it is about trying to find like really people that are slotting in nicely to the team as we're already moving at top speed, if that makes sense. And so yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned actually, so 30 is the right size. This role is not a new role. It is a backfill for attrition.
Mhm.
What is Richard doing now? Is Richard still with the company? Is this a promotion at the company, or has Richard been promoted externally?
Yeah, he took a different job. He took a job at Evolve PR, which is a PR agency.
Hmm.
They work on a zillion different things. They work on like, big games or whatever. And he was just like the next sort of stop on his career trajectory, especially because Evolve works on bigger, more AAA focused projects. It is one of the things about the marketing relations person at Akupara is that it's like starting a cold lawnmower that and it's like the first time you need to mow the lawn in the season, and you're
Where,
just trying to get
where
the
is
thing
this
going.
going?
Yeah, you're just like trying to I need to activate this. Obviously, if you are working on like bigger AAA projects, if you're working on the Halo game, it's not hard to find press who are interested in the next Halo game. It is pretty tough to find press who are interested in some no-name indie that you have played and is very cool, but not necessarily, I don't know. You have to introduce this stuff to people.
Okay,
Is really what it
so
comes down to.
do we need to edit this job description to throw in your lawnmower analogy?
Yeah, yeah. I'm really proud of that analogy because I feel like it's very useful. And that's something that we've seen, right? Like I've interviewed people for the job, and I do think that they're quality candidates. To be honest, it's very rare for us to get somebody who isn't right like capable of the base work that needs to get done. But sometimes we'll be talking to people, and it's clear that they don't have the experience starting from zero. They have the experience coming into something that's already at cruising altitude. And that is a skill set that's useful and a skill set that's important, but it's a little bit different than what we're looking for. If you are the PR person who has worked on Call of Duty for the last 5 years, hypothetically speaking, you might not be as suited for this job as someone who has been working in the indie space or introducing go to market plans for stuff that hasn't necessarily been introduced to the public yet.
Awesome. So I would just like to actually point out this marketing and relations role sounds really cool. It sounds similar to some of my roles. So I've always worked in account management type of roles where I get to work with a lot of different companies. And we see here Richard was able in this role to obviously work with a bunch of different companies, Evolve PR being one of them. And that exposed Richard to this opportunity at Evolve PR, right? So these are
Mhm.
roles where you're going to be able to meet a ton of people and ton of companies throughout games, expand your network, learn a ton about what everybody else is working on, and then potentially base and highlight yourself for growth opportunities elsewhere if that's something that was desirable. So these are really cool career making roles, to be honest with you. We do have some questions coming in from the community now, so we'll
Yep.
jump into those. I do want to, let's just kick it off with a couple of things around interviewing specifically, though. So you did
Sure.
mention that you're involved in reviewing applications and interviewing.
Yeah, I'm the main person doing interviews, which is again one of those things where somebody has to figure it out. And I like doing interviews, and I think I'm strong at them. So most of the time, the interview, like everybody who's interviewing for the job will be interviewing with me.
Awesome. So starting off the interview conversation, what's like the one key skill that you're really looking for when you're reviewing applications or you're interviewing somebody?
The most important skill I have ever learned, and it took a long time. This is what I think of my college years as being, right? I went to school for writing, like creative writing, and I don't really think I learned how to write at college. I think I learned how to take feedback, which is to say, one of the things that happen when you're doing creative writing in college is you are bringing in your story or whatever, and you are putting it in front of a bunch of different people, and everyone, these are called workshops. Everyone is talking about the thing that you made, and they're being critical about it, and you need to just learn to really take that feedback well and not get defensive or not allow some of the tougher sort of emotions around that to crop up, right? Like this one professor, I had this phrase that I really loved, where she said you need to divorce your ego. right? Which is a tough thing to do. And not everybody is great at doing that, but it is the number one skill. And it is the thing that I don't think is super teachable about the job. I feel like everything else is teachable. I feel like everything else, if somebody walks into this job and they go, hey, listen, I have done a ton of events work and I've done a little bit of press stuff, but not as much as you would want. It's okay, cool. I think you can pick up the press stuff. That's fine. That's teachable. But it is very hard for me to talk to someone who is showing some of the signs of they don't have that like I take feedback. I understand how someone can talk about a thing that I made without meaning that stuff personally as a like that is the skill that I am thinking about and that I am.
I mean, that is awesome. I love that so much, and it's such a critical kind of key component and call out. And like you just said, it's one of those things where it feels like it's more ingrained, right, than coachable. It can be coachable, but I think that's coachable over maybe a longer extended period of time.
Yeah.
But somebody who's able to take feedback, process feedback, that actually is part of being coachable. And none of us is perfect. We all have a lot to learn. We all can improve, and part of that improvement is recognizing the opportunity for improvement. And if you can't take feedback, then it may be difficult for you to recognize the opportunity for improvement. And then then you're going to be limited in your ability to actually learn and grow. And we just talked about one of the key kind of components of the Akupara culture is ambition, kind of striving, learning, drive, and growth. Taking feedback, asking questions in the interview that are going to be circling around and trying to identify somebody's ability to take feedback is going to be a great tool for deciphering whether or not somebody's going to be a fit at Akupara. So how can somebody then best represent themselves in an interview when it comes to showcasing their ability to take feedback?
The thing that I always want to hear is, I ask this question a lot, right? What is a situation where, you had to give feedback to someone else? Or what is a situation where someone was giving you feedback? The question that really gets to the heart of this one that I ask in an interview is I ask people to compare specifically around press releases, right? So I say something along the lines of, if you've written a press release or if you've written whatever, what is the difference between the first one of those you've written and the most recent one of those you've written, right? Because the thing that certain folks will say about that is they will take it easy on themselves, if that makes sense. They'll be like, oh, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I was just whatever. And now I'm much more this and that. And it's like those sorts of general answers don't communicate that this is a person who understands what it's like to be critical, right? Like self-critical, obviously. But you will get people who have really strong answers here who are like, hey, listen, man, when I first started, I was so bad at tenses and I was mixing up my metaphors all the time and I was using really weak verbs. This is one that I'm always thinking about, is weak verbs, because when you're writing, every word has to justify its place on your page. And something that I feel like I see, I don't want to say amateurs, but I guess really amateurs, something that like amateurs do, myself included, is you will sometimes support a really weak verb with a really powerful adverb, and that reads terribly, right? Don't say, I don't know, a good example of this is off the top of my head, like he said forcefully, right? Say he exclaims, he shouts, right? Like the connotation of shout gets says forcefully, and you can just condense all of that into one powerful verb rather than multiple different
Right.
sort of supporting like words. And I think about that kind of stuff a lot. It's rare that I'm looking for someone who can talk about the overall everybody gets the overarching stuff. If I'm interviewing for the position, I'm talking about tone, for instance. The question of what is the tone that you would use for this project? People always get that question right. It's, oh, I would be conversational, I would be relatable, I would be likable. Yeah, okay. What are the specific things that you do in your language that are those things, right? I get that we want to be relatable. I get that we want to be conversational. How do you accomplish that goal? And it's that how do you question that really gets to the heart of this. I have the skills to be analytical and self-critical about the things that I'm working on to really make them better and make them shine.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out you ask situational questions, right? So these are our
Yeah.
behavioral interview questions. Tell me about a time. Tell me about a story when you did this. We should be prepared in our interviews with examples, right? If we have them. And then key, we're just pointing out, be humble, right? Express humility in your interviews. A lot of us feel like we got to go in an interview and we have to be perfect, and we can't actually show some of our faults, some of our areas for improvement, or some of the mistakes that we made in the past. But what Buddy here is saying is actually, no, we need to see those. And if actually we don't see those, then that's going to tell us something about you that would indicate that you're actually not a fit for our culture. And we're going to make a no hire decision based upon that versus you're telling us that you're going to be perfect at the job. Catherine, can you grab us a couple questions from the community, please?
Yep. Yeah, related to interviewing. Tian Lynch, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Although I have been working in marketing for most of my career, I recently shifted my focus to finding a marketing role in the gaming industry. In my search, I found that many places, both indie and AAA, require industry experience, even for entry level positions. Any advice for breaking into the industry after being on the outside looking in?
So one thing I would maybe do, which is a program that I run for this specific purpose, is, and I swear to God, I am not shilling right now. I know this is going to sound like I'm shilling, but I'm not. Is you can join the Akupara Discord. We have a program for this, which we call like our VIP program, which are folks who sign an NDA with the company, and we give them in development builds of the games that we're working on, and they give us feedback, and obviously that feedback is important for us when it comes to developing the game. But the big thing that, like, the thing that got us to think about this program, that really got me to think about this program, was credits, right? A huge thing when it comes to working games is getting credits, is getting your name on a title that you worked on. And being able to do that via playtesting is really huge. And so, like, obviously all of the people who are VIP testers for our individual games, they get a credit on that game and they can point to that and they can go, hey, yeah, I like, it wasn't a huge thing. I did it in my free time, but I was a playtester on XYZ. This is the kind of feedback I gave on that, and this is what I wanted to get done. I also think that it is easy to find the the enthusiasm in games that is not necessarily present in other places. I actually have a friend who is also a marketing guy, but he is a marketing guy in a much more sort of official, not official, but like B2B sort of corporate company sort of thing. Like, he works at, it's an electrical engineering company. They essentially make like remote controls. And something that he talks about is the enthusiasm, because who wants to buy a remote control? Nobody wants to buy a remote control. You have to. Maybe your remote breaks or whatever else, and you just have to go on and you have to convince someone who is just glancing at the thing to get that. The big difference between that and games is everyone is enthusiastic about games. Anybody who is working in or close to or experiencing games is enthusiastic about those because they are entertainment, which is part of why you will see people like in big, especially big like AAA sort of lifestyle games like Destiny, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, or whatever, like, who really revolve their lives around that stuff. And finding ways to tap into that enthusiasm, whether that's press, whether that's going to conventions, whether that's going to events, whether that's like working for hire on smaller sorts of things, right? Like, that enthusiasm will definitely go a long way.
Awesome. Do we just find out about this playtesting, VIP playtesting in your Discord, or is there a page on your website that describes the program or anything?
Yeah, so the way that it happens in the Discord is, so we have a level up bot or whatever in the Discord. It just tracks the amount that you're hanging out in the Discord, talking to people, posting all this other sort of stuff. And it is one of the sort of milestones. If you come into the Discord, if you spend time in there, engage with the community, you get an invite to the VIP program.
Awesome. I love that. I'd like to be able to point some of our members towards that opportunity.
Yeah. Next question from Kina. What input do you have for an indie studio pre release of a game, specifically in terms of marketing and community management? When do you recommend investing time and resources into these two fundamental aspects while a game is still in development?
We touch it from the word. Okay, so here's the pipeline. What happens is David is obviously doing all of the outreach for this. People are submitting games to Akupara for publishing consideration, right? David gives those to us on the publishing team and he says, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And it'll be a demo, it'll be a vertical slice, it'll be a pitch deck or whatever. And we give him our feedback on that project, whether that's this looks good, this looks bad. I think this will, one that comes up is, I think this will make a lot of money, but I particularly do not care. I'm not interested. Like that kind of, we just give that kind of feedback. And that's what helps David make the decision about what games we sign and what games we don't sign. Um, and then once we have a game signed, the marketing team is typically hands off for quite a while because we don't want to be in limbo for years because of, I don't know if, like, we think of this as wish list decay. There, man, to explain this as quickly as I possibly can, there are three major moments in the marketing campaign of any game, right? The reveal, the announcement, and the launch, right? The reveal is when you say, hey, we are doing this game, it is happening, here's a big trailer, go wishlist it, right? The second one is the announcement, is the release date announcement, where we go, hey, the game is coming out on date and time. And then the third one is obviously the game is launching, you can go play it now. These are the three major beats in any marketing campaign. The further back you put the reveal, the worse the wish lists from that reveal appreciate in value, right? They decay over time because what happens is, let's say I reveal the game, I go, oh, this looks cool, I put it on my wish list, and then it doesn't come out for 2 years. That person is going to go, what is this game? I don't remember this game. That's so weird. And they're not gonna buy it. So what we're trying to do is we try and scrunch together those three beats as close as they possibly can. Which is why, like I said, we typically sign the game and we hold on to it for a while as development goes, and then we reveal it more directly. Once we hit the reveal, that's when the marketing campaign truly starts, and that's the pre-release period, or the pre-launch period is what we call that. So that is everything from the reveal of the game to the announcement. And once the game has the release date for the game has been announced to the launch of the game, that is the launch window, where this is where it is really dominating everything. We're talking about it all the time. We're putting the biggest thrust of our efforts happen inside that launch window, and then everything after that launch window is post launch, which obviously we're paying attention to and dealing with. We own the project from beginning to end, and there are projects at Akupara that I'm like, this is the project for me. Please God, let's sign this. And that kind of enthusiasm is something that we obviously respond to. It's actually much more common that we pass on a project because no one is enthusiastic about it, even if it's going to make money. There's sometimes we just go, listen, this is not for us. None of us care. None of us are really all that interested. But it's pretty common for someone to really champion. Anytime we've ever signed a game, there's almost always one person on the team who went really hard for it, who was like, this is the game for us, let's go sign it.
That's awesome. The fact that you have so much freedom to reject or really like approve of a game. That's indie's power, baby.
Yeah. It's also one of those things where, I got my start in movie, like before I ever did film stuff or game stuff, I was doing film stuff. I was a script reader for a production company. And that part of the process is a core aspect of being able to talk about and market these kinds of games. One of the things that people like is they like submitting games to us because we give really comprehensive feedback about those games, which is actually rare. Most of the time, if you're a developer and you submit a game for publishing consideration to a company, you get a yes or a no. Even if we give someone a no, we give them a multi-page document of all of the things that we found about that game, which might be minor stuff, might be bugs, but it might be like core, like mechanical stuff. I might be talking about, the kinesthetics of this gunplay don't feel good because there isn't screen shake or there isn't whatever else associated with it. So it doesn't feel like I'm shooting a giant blunderbuss. It feels like I'm shooting like a BB gun, that kind, which is a very specific piece of tangible feedback that a developer can use and work on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So we're over time by 3 minutes. Do you still have sometimes for two
Yeah,
other
I
questions?
actually have plenty of time, and I do feel like I want to answer as many questions as I possibly can. I don't want to leave anybody hanging, so I am definitely down to keep going as long as there are questions to answer.
Amazing. Okay. Maggie asks, what's a skill that you learned working at Akupara that you surprised yourself getting good at?
Probably trailers. I made this joke the other day. So when I applied to Akupara, I definitely put video editing and like production on my resume, which was one of those resume white lies. Like the true answer was yes, I did that stuff. I did take a film class in college that required using Adobe Premiere, but at the time that was like 10 years previous. And it's, oh yeah, I can definitely do video editing. Sure, hire me or whatever. And I was just joking about this with some friends of mine because I have now had 2 trailers of mine, like in the Nintendo Indie World Showcase when Nintendo is talking about indies coming to the Switch. There are trailers for that, and it is an incredibly surreal moment to what better proof of there, I guess, is there that there's this skill, right? Hey, that's me. That's my trailer. I did that.
Yeah, totally. Um,
How'd you get good at it?
The big thing that I did was spent a lot of time like watching and reading YouTube videos and like guides and stuff on the. It was always easy for me to conceptualize of what I was looking for. I always knew, I was like, what do I expect this to look like? That was clear in my head, right? The final version of this, right? It is mostly just about figuring out the specific things I can do inside of Adobe Premiere that allow me to actualize that. Which is to say, okay, we go from this moment to that moment to the next moment, and figuring out what just like the technical side of things are to actualize the vision, which is maybe its own skill. I don't know if people have the ability to just think about what it looks like in their head and put that to paper in the same way. But yeah, I also created like a whole video pipeline. This is something that I've been writing a big blog about actually on the Akupara Games website. Where I just talk about the process that I go through when I'm creating specifically like a deep dive video, which is a video where I'm explaining game mechanics to players for the first time. These are pretty valuable. They get a lot of like events featuring and that kind of thing. And I created this pipeline for myself to see it and to really understand, okay, how is this thing going to form from the nascent idea in the back of my head to the finished product.
yeah, that was my next question actually. Do you recognize like patterns like over time for trailers of just okay, here's the next trailer. Okay, so the pattern is like the first part, the introduction, and then the big surprise, and then like the cliffhanger at the end, for example. Do you have like a favorite type of trailer like format that you go to?
That's interesting. I guess I do. I think a big thing that I do for trailers that maybe other people don't. I don't want to say other people don't. A big thing that I think about a lot when it comes to trailers is music. I actually,
Mm.
to be honest, I remember I was really depressed about this one. Even though it was the correct note. This is like the taking feedback kind of thing. I made a whole trailer and I cut and every cut was on the beat of the music I was using, which was a really finicky process, but I eventually got it down. I was like, yes, this is cool. Every couple of bars, the scene cuts and it has this real building sort of momentum. And then I showed the client and they say, I love everything about this trailer except the music. Can we change the music, please? I was like, no, the music is the whole point. But to be honest, they were actually very correct about that. And I eventually ended up recutting the whole trailer more or less from scratch
Oh
because I wanted
wow.
to keep that same effect. So I changed the song and I just changed up the clips so that the clips cut to the beat on the new song in the same way
Oh
that they
heck
had
yeah.
done for the old song. So
Mm.
yeah, that was pretty funny.
Thank you. So we have a last question I would like to go over, which is okay. Yeah, wait, I lost it. A moment. Okay. How do you compare different candidates after the interview is over?
I hope this does not sound weird or flippant, but I make a tier list, like imagine like a Super Smash Brothers tier list. You have S tier, you have A tier, B tier, C tier kind of thing. Like I said before, very rarely do we get people. If someone doesn't have the skills that we're looking for, most of the time that person doesn't get an interview. We can see it in the resume stage and go, this isn't necessarily the right fit. But basically, anytime I've ever gotten into an interview with someone, that person has the kind of core competence that we're looking for. They have the basic skills, or at least the basic sort of skill threads that could be woven into this job. They could pick up the skills, like the skills necessary. So really when I'm comparing candidates afterwards, it's all about kind of extras, right? It's about upside. It's about what are the specifically cool and interesting and important things that this individual person brings to the table that nobody else brings. So for instance, yeah, I won't use this current job as an example just because I don't want to be, I don't know, weird, but for other jobs that we've interviewed in the past for, when we were interviewing, okay, we eventually split off my job from Miguel's job, so there's a difference between community manager and social media manager, and I was the person who essentially hired the social media manager. And we had these 3 candidates that we came down to, and the differences in all of those candidates were clearly like like they could do the basic aspects of this job, but one of them had a lot of on camera sort of experience, and she was a really good candidate when it came to being able to be the public face of the company and just be friendly and relatable and affable and all of those things. And that was this thing that was like, yes, okay, this candidate is special for this reason. This is why we would want to hire this person, why we think of this person as being special. For, I guess I can throw Miguel under the bus a little bit here. For, is not throwing him under the bus, I guess I'm giving him a huge compliment. For Miguel, it was writing. He was the person, like I talked before about that, like that specifics question, right? Where it's everybody gets the tone question right. It is the thing that people will get wrong is the specifics about it question. If I ask someone what tone do you want to use, everyone goes, oh, I'd be relatable, I'd be casual, I'd be fun, I'd be whatever. Miguel was the only person that really answered the follow-up question, okay, how would you make that tone? What are the specific things in your language, in your writing that you would do in order to facilitate that? And his answer was like, oh yeah, like that's easy. I wouldn't use capitalization, I wouldn't use punctuation, because the way people read that stuff on the internet is very formal. Having very correct grammar is something that comes off as formal. It comes off as business speak. Whereas if you are running a brand account and
I feel called out.
if you're running, honestly, I was called out because I was that guy running that account at the time, which is why he's better at the job than I was. And so his ability, like that was the thing that made him special. That I was like, yeah, this is someone who thinks about the writing aspect of the job, the copy aspect of the job in a very specific sense, and isn't able just to articulate the kind of correct overall direction, but the correct specific tactics that they would use in order to get there. And then we had a third person who was very data oriented, which was really neat and not something that we were used to, who was someone who had worked at a big company. And so they had a lot of experience with really analytical data. Well, this gets this number of numbers and that this number means that. And that's just not something we had on the team. And it was like, oh, okay, here are 3 different candidates. We can either choose from a person that's really specialized in an on-screen persona. We can choose from someone who's really specialized in the language demands of the job, or we could specialize in someone who has real bona fides when it comes to the data. And that is how we want to think about and compare candidates. We want to compare people based on those sort of strengths. So, yep, that is how we approach things. I make a tier list. I say people are a C tier candidate is someone who has basic competence but doesn't bring a lot extra to the table. A B tier candidate typically brings something extra to the table that is uh that is common. Maybe they have, or maybe it's not necessarily common, but it's not necessarily something that we're looking for in the job, right? So for instance, it might be for this theoretical job, if someone is applying to be the marketing strategist, the relations person for the marketing team, and they come in with a lot of social experience, that is a plus, right? It is cool if you come into that and you have run the social account for a big company or something along those lines. But it is a little bit outside of the job's purview. So it's a plus, but it's a little, it doesn't give you as much as someone who comes in as an A or an S tier candidate who has multiple things that they really shine on. The real perfect candidate is someone who doesn't just demonstrate competency, but mastery in all of these different jobs. They have a focus on press and they can talk a lot about the kinds of press contacts that they've made. They can talk about the events that they've worked at and they've worked on, and they can talk about their direct relationship with a bunch of different influencers. That kind of person is the perfect unicorn candidate that probably doesn't exist, but theoretically that's the person who would be in like S tier. And then if you could demonstrate one of those individual things, right? Like maybe you don't have great press contacts, maybe you've never done events, but you're really ingrained in Twitch and you have a lot of contacts in the Twitch space, the streaming kind of content creation space, that might make you an A tier candidate where it's okay, if we really want to go hard on influencers with our pick here, we're going to choose whoever this person is. This hypothetical person, Matilda.
Good answer. No, a tier list I think is very smart, especially when you get like a lot of candidates. Like it's a really easy way to categorize like your priorities as like a hiring person. So I like that. We have a last question that I
Sure.
totally skipped. I'm sorry, Kat Mars. Do you believe the marketing and social team will grow enough to search for new hires in the near future, besides the opportunity you currently have with PR?
So technically speaking, yes. Which is to say that I've always envisioned especially as publishing has become a more important piece of our overall puzzle, we've always envisioned the marketing team growing, but beyond that sort of three-person core. And one of the pieces of that is bringing on like another social person to help me get out, another community person to help myself out, maybe an artist. We've always talked about having a dedicated art person on the team, someone who's really drilled down into the creative aspect of social images or that kind of. Though I will say, technically, I guess I'm lying when I say it's a three-person team because we do have we do have another community manager who is part-time. One of the projects that we signed recently was Rain World, which is obviously an indie game that came out a couple of years ago, but we saw an opportunity to create a big expansion, a big piece of DLC, because there's this huge modding community for Rain World. And so what we essentially did was we got a bunch of modders together and we connected them with the developer specifically. And now we have folks who were modding the game who are like developing content for the base game itself. And as a part of that process, we found the Discord moderator for the sort of fan Discord. He's a guy named Riv Otter who I love quite a lot, and I've wanted to hire him for a long time. And I basically said, hey, listen, we want to bring you on to part-time to be the community manager for this particular project. And that kind of stuff is definitely open. We also do have an internship program, which is, it's not open for applications. It's a partnership that we do with a particular school, but that is like we are opening up entry level stuff from time to get those jobs filled and get people a certain amount of experience. Because one of the things that we have done to make the company successful is train up people from that state, right? Like part of my stuff with Riv, I'm the person who manages Riv on the Rain World project directly. Part of my thinking with that is I want to give him all of the skills that I have. And I want to have him doing all of those things that are the requisite pieces of launching a game. And when I'm doing them, I'm focused on a million different, like we obviously have way more projects than just one. When he's doing it, it is just for the one project, it's just for Rain World, essentially. So I hope that answers the question.
We're an hour 20 in. I don't wanna take up too much more of Buddy's day. I think we could just start to wrap up here and then ask Buddy if there's any kind of parting shots of kind of advice for job seekers that would be applying to your open roles, or those that are looking to level up in their marketing community roles.
That is a good question. Maybe something that I will do. I guess I don't want to do this while we are interviewing, but maybe in a week or two, something that I think would be neat is I like the idea of posting somewhere the interview questions that I ask, just because I think that it would be cool to show people the thought process behind the kinds of questions that I'm asking and why I'm asking them. I think that would probably help people. I don't know. People in chat can tell me if I'm being ridiculous.
Oh,
I feel like
100%.
that would really help people understand from the hiring side, what is the hiring person thinking when they are inside of an interview. Really, my thing is, and my biggest advice always will be, is look for the ways to make yourself special, to go deep, to use that tone question as an example. There are questions that you're going to be asked in any of these interviews that are layups, right? These are the questions that everyone gets. And it is important to get those questions, obviously. Someone who fails a basic question like that, that's a red flag. That person probably isn't getting further in the process. But the thing that really leads to a hire, at least from my perspective, when it comes to making the decision on this is the person that we want to bring into the company, is the person who goes further than that, right? It is Miguel's ability to not just articulate, oh, this is the correct tone to take, but this is the way that I would actuate that tone. I would make that tone a reality in the specific language that I would use. That's the thing that got him hired at Akupara. And I would just look for those sorts of opportunities where you can really knock a question out of the park, where you can really, I don't know, sit down with the person you're interviewing and give them an answer they are not hearing from everybody else that is being interviewed. I guess that's my biggest piece of advice.
So I would very much appreciate get those questions. I'm posting a link in the chat right now. He had the idea of creating an interview question bank on our Notion and then just sharing
Oh,
that
very
with
cool.
our community members, and that being sourced with and filled with questions that our community members were asked during their interviews. If you could drop those, you send us a DM or share them in our server at some point, that would be fantastic. I'd love any thoughts that you have or any guides or documents that you use internally that you could scrub for public consumption. Sharing part of what I want to do here, because I've been on that side of the table, the one that you're on as the interviewer, break down walls and increase the transparency and share what's happening behind the scenes so that our interviewers are knowing what they're up against. They have a better knowledge and understanding of the rules of the games that they are playing. We don't always like the rules. We'd like to maybe change some of those rules. Part of changing those rules is actually getting hired so that you can then get in and then actually have an influence. But it's useful to know those rules so that we can then adjust. And this hiring thing it's a nebulous kind of black box for most people. So
yeah,
the more
definitely. That's a
transparency
big
we
thing
can
that
provide
I'm
is
always
awesome.
thinking about, which is ways that I can peel back the curtain to show stuff that is, and like why stuff is happening the way it does, which maybe means that this should be like a blog. I talked before about the video blog that I'm writing, right? These are blogs that we write to help other indie folks out, but maybe I will write a sort of interviews post-mortem to this whole process or something along the lines that, you know, that I can share and we can reference with people.
Yeah, so we love those, and we actually pin them in some of our resources channels.
Cool.
So we would love to see something like that. We also, I'm still in the process of designing it, but I'm working on adding a blog to our website, and that is exactly the type of content that we'd want to host on our blog. It's also one of those things where a cool feature about this blog is that when you go to, say, like an Akupara job description, we're going to then dynamically populate the things that Akupara employees have actually produced for the blog. So you will then dynamically be able to see the recap of this conversation that we just had. You'll dynamically be able to then click into your interview recap, which is, hey, we just went through a round of hiring. Here's some of the lessons that we've learned. Here's some of the patterns that we saw. Here's some of the things that we were looking for and our recommendations to future applicants, which is a great way to even help make your job easier. Is all these individuals are basically reading the template, the guide on how to apply for an Akupara job.
Did we lose you?
No, I'm done. We might have lost.
Okay. Everything's fine. Okay, so let's wrap up. Thank you, Buddy. Don't hesitate to share your socials in event chat so that everyone can follow you, follow Akupara, all that good stuff.
Yeah, obviously follow the Akupara account, but this is my very cool special personal account that I don't post all that much to. I plug my personal podcast on that account. Is that good enough? The Akupara Games account, which is run by my partner in crime, I guess, Miguel. That is the Akupara account, which has much better content to follow.
Awesome,
beautiful. Buddy. Thank you so much.
Okay. I guess I gotta go get working. So I will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for having me, and I hope everybody has a great time. Has a great day.
Great.
Thank you so much, Buddy.
Thanks, Buddy.
See you guys later.
Thank you, everyone.